when Darth Vader threw Emperor Palpatine into the reactor shaft aboard the Death Star too. His redemption was sealed. But what if Anakin Skywalker had survived his injuries instead of dying in Luke's arms? The galaxy would face a radically different future. When the Death Star burned in the skies above Endor and the Emperor fell into the abyss, Luke Skywalker carried his father away from the flames. But in this path, Anakin Skywalker did not die. His body was broken. His breath still labored beneath the mask. Yet life clung to him like a stubborn flame refusing to fade. The rebels, unsure if they should destroy him or save him, followed Luke's desperate plea. Doctors worked endlessly to stabilize him, and slowly, the monster known as Darth Vader was revealed to be a man, frail, scarred, but alive. For the first time in decades, the galaxy would have to face the living shadow of its greatest terror. Luke stayed by his side, believing that there was more to his father than darkness. Anakin, now free of the Emperor's chains, looked upon his son with gratitude and sorrow. The guilt of Alderaan, the slaughter of the Jedi, and the years of tyranny weighed heavily on him. Yet he breathed, and with each breath came the chance to atone. Leia Organa, however, could not accept so easily. For her, the face behind the mask was the one who had destroyed her home, the father who had hidden in smoke and fear. Where Luke saw hope, Leia saw a wound that could never heal. Their bond as siblings was tested by the shadow of their father. The New Republic debated his fate. Many wanted trial and execution, while others whispered that his knowledge of Imperial secrets could save countless lives. Imperial loyalists saw his survival as a beacon, and some called for him to lead them once more. But Anakin refused to rise as their emperor. His heart, torn and weary, sought only to guide his son. Together, Luke and Anakin began to rebuild. The Jedi Temple would rise again, not in the image of the past, but shaped by lessons of failure and the scars of redemption. Anakin became both teacher and warning, a man who had walked the deepest night and returned to the light. His survival became a question that echoed across the galaxy. Could the sins of Darth Vader ever be forgiven, or would Anakin Skywalker forever walk between hope and condemnation? When the second Death Star exploded above Endor, the galaxy believed Darth Vader had perished with the Emperor. Yet in this story, Anakin Skywalker survived. His body was shattered, his strength drained, but his son refused to let him die. Luke Skywalker, carrying the weight of hope, brought his father to safety. Against all odds, healers and machines kept him alive. As he awoke, Anakin felt the weight of his sins pressing against him. He no longer hid behind the mask of Darth Vader. For the first time, he saw his reflection not as a Sith Lord, but as a broken man who had lost everything. The cries of the past haunted him, the screams of the Jedi he betrayed, the voice of Padme Amidala, and the innocence of children silenced by his blade. Yet, beside him stood Luke, the son who believed in him, and through that belief came the first spark of peace he had known in decades. Leia Organa, however, could not share her brother's vision. To her, this man was not a father, but the destroyer of Alderaan. She struggled to see beyond the black armor and the terror it represented. Her heart ached with conflict, torn between the truth of her bloodline and the memory of her people. The New Republic faced its own storm. Senators argued over his fate. Some demanded execution, claiming justice for the countless lives he had ruined. Others argued he could be used as a weapon against the Imperial remnants. Luke alone spoke of redemption, telling them that Anakin Skywalker was no longer their enemy. Imperial warlords, scattered and desperate, whispered his name like a prayer. Some begged for his return, believing the Dark Lord would rise again. But Anakin refused the chains of empire. Instead, he chose a quieter path, standing beside Luke in rebuilding what the Jedi once were. The galaxy watched him carefully, never certain if he was a savior or a curse. To some, his survival was hope that even the darkest soul could find the light. To others, it was a reminder of nightmares that had not yet faded. Anakin Skywalker lived, and his very existence became the greatest trial of the age. When the Emperor fell and the Death Star crumbled in a fire, Luke Skywalker carried his father to safety. In this tale, Darth Vader did not take his last breath on Endor. Anakin Skywalker, scarred and broken, survived through the will of his son and the stubborn flame of life that refused to be extinguished. In the days that followed, the galaxy was shaken. The monster who had hunted the Jedi and ruled beside the Emperor was alive. To many, this was not a miracle but a nightmare. Yet Luke saw beyond the black armor. He saw the man who had once been a hero, a man who had fallen but had chosen, at the end, to rise again. For Anakin, survival was not a gift but a burden. The weight of his crimes pressed down on him with every breath. He remembered the screams of the Jedi Temple, the fire of Mustafar, and the fear his name had carried across the stars. But he also felt something he thought he had lost forever, the love of his son. Luke's unwavering belief gave him the strength to face a future without the shadow of Darth Vader. Leia Organa could not find peace so easily. To her, the man beneath the mask was still the one who had destroyed Alderaan. She struggled to reconcile her hatred with the truth of her bloodline. Every time she looked at him, she saw the ghost of her people, and forgiveness seemed a distant dream. The New Republic was torn apart by the question of what to do with him. Some cried for execution, saying no crime could be erased. Others saw a chance to use his knowledge of the Empire to secure their fragile freedom. In the Senate chambers, his very existence became a storm of debate. Anakin himself sought no throne, no power, only the chance to guide Luke. Together, father and son began to speak of rebuilding the Jedi, not as they once were, but stronger, wiser, and less blind to the flaws that had destroyed them. The galaxy watched with wary eyes. To some, he was a symbol of redemption. To others, a shadow that refused to die. Anakin Skywalker walked among them, alive, a living reminder that even the darkest night can give way to dawn. When the Emperor was cast into the abyss and the second Death Star burned in the sky, Luke Skywalker believed his father was gone. But in this story, Anakin Skywalker did not die. Though his body was failing and his strength nearly gone, he clung to life as Luke pulled him from the flames. Against every expectation, the Dark Lord survived. The galaxy was stunned. Darth Vader, the shadow of fear, still lived. For many across the stars, this was not a tale of redemption, but a cruel twist of fate. Worlds scarred by war whispered of vengeance, and soldiers who had lost everything cried for justice. Yet Luke refused to surrender his father to hatred. To him, Anakin was no longer Vader, but a man who had returned from the darkness. Anakin himself awoke to a reality heavier than chains. The faces of the Jedi he destroyed haunted his every thought. He heard the screams of children, the roar of fire on Mustafar, and the echo of Padme, Amidala's final breath. His survival was not a victory, but a punishment, a chance to feel the full weight of what he had done. Leia Organa, though bound by blood, could not forgive. For her, he was the destroyer of Alderaan, the hand of oppression that had shaped her life in grief. She looked at him and saw not a father, but a tyrant who had stolen her family and her world. Her heart was torn between the bond of her brother and the memory of her people. The New Republic trembled in debate. Senators demanded he be tried, executed, or exiled forever. Others saw a weapon in his survival, a source of knowledge against the fractured imperial warlords still clawing for power. His presence threatened to divide the very republic Luke hoped to protect. Yet Anakin sought no throne, no command, only the chance to walk beside his son. With Luke, he spoke of rebuilding the Jedi, not in the image of the old order, but as something stronger, wiser, and unbroken by arrogance. Across the stars, people argued if redemption was possible. To some, he was living proof that light could be found again. To others, he remained a shadow that had nearly consumed the galaxy. Anakin Skywalker endured, a man both cursed and blessed to walk once more among the living. When the Emperor was defeated and the Death Star was torn apart, the galaxy believed Darth Vader had perished with him. But in this story, Anakin Skywalker did not die. Though his body was scarred and broken, his spirit clung to life, pulled back from the edge by the determination of his son. Luke Skywalker refused to let him fade, carrying him to safety as fire consumed the station above Endor. In secret, the rebels worked to preserve his life. Surgeons and machines struggled against years of damage, yet somehow he endured. When his eyes opened, Anakin no longer felt the chains of Darth Vader. He was a man reborn, though haunted by the shadows of his past. The galaxy, however, saw him differently. To many, he was not a hero returned, but a monster who had cheated death. Luke stood beside him, firm in his belief that his father could find peace. He spoke of redemption, of lessons learned through suffering, and of a future where Anakin's knowledge could heal instead of destroy. Anakin, moved by his son's faith, accepted the path of atonement, though he doubted the galaxy would ever forgive. Leia Organa struggled more than anyone. For her, Anakin was not only the father she never knew, but the tyrant who had destroyed her world. Every memory of Alderaan burned like a wound whenever she looked at him. Her heart fought between anger and the faint whisper of family, leaving her torn in ways she could not voice. The New Republic itself was divided. Some demanded execution, believing no redemption could balance the weight of his crimes. Others feared him, but also recognized his knowledge of Imperial war machines and hidden strongholds. Senators argued day after day, while the people whispered his name in fear and disbelief. Through it all, Anakin sought no crown and no command. He wanted only to walk beside his son, guiding him, helping him avoid the same mistakes. Together, they dreamed of a new Jedi Order, one that would not fall to arrogance or blindness. The galaxy watched with unease. To some, his survival was a miracle. To others, it was a curse. Anakin Skywalker lived, and his very presence reshaped the destiny of the stars. When the throne room of the Death Star fell into chaos and the Emperor was cast into the depths, Luke Skywalker carried his father away from the fire. In this story, Anakin Skywalker did not surrender to death. Though his body was broken, his spirit clung to life, and through the care of the rebels he endured. Machines and healers worked tirelessly, and slowly the Dark Lord of the Sith opened his eyes once more. For Luke, it was proof that hope could shine even in the darkest places. He believed his father's survival was not a curse, but a chance for true redemption. Anakin, however, awoke into a world where his name was spoken with hatred. The galaxy remembered not the hero of the Clone Wars, but the terror of Darth Vader, the hand of tyranny who had crushed entire systems beneath the Empire's rule. Haunted by memories, Anakin felt the weight of every life he had taken. The screams of the Jedi younglings, the betrayal of his brothers, and the shadow of Padme Amidala echoed within him. Yet Luke's presence gave him strength. For the first time in decades, he was not alone. Leia Organa looked upon him with fire in her heart. To her, he was not a father, but the murderer of Alderaan, the figure who had stolen everything she held dear. She struggled to understand Luke's forgiveness and could not bring herself to offer the same. Between brother and sister, a wound grew, born of the man who had shaped both their destinies. The New Republic was thrown into turmoil. Some senators demanded his execution, declaring that no one so steeped in darkness should walk free. Others argued that his knowledge of the Empire's secrets could save countless lives. Entire worlds trembled at the thought of his survival, fearing that the nightmare of Darth Vader had not truly ended. Anakin sought no command, no throne, and no recognition. He chose instead to stand beside Luke, guiding him in the rebuilding of the Jedi. He swore never again to be blind to pride or anger, teaching lessons carved from his own failures. The galaxy watched in silence. To many, he was a curse. To others, a symbol of light reborn. Anakin Skywalker lived, and his very existence became the question that would shape the age to come. When the Emperor was cast down into the reactor core and the Death Star began to collapse, Luke Skywalker dragged his father to safety. In this telling, Anakin Skywalker did not die on that night. His body was burned, his strength nearly gone, but through the will of his son and the skill of rebel healers, he clung to life. The galaxy that believed Darth Vader had perished was forced to face a truth stranger than death itself. He still lived. For Anakin, awakening was not triumph, but torment. He felt the crushing weight of his past press down on him like 1,000 chains. Every scream, every blade he had swung in anger, every world scarred by the Empire's rule haunted his thoughts. The name Darth Vader had once brought fear, but now it brought shame. Yet when he opened his eyes, Luke was there, his faith unshaken, his voice filled with love for a father he had saved. Leia Organa could not forgive so easily. To her, the man before her was the destroyer of Alderaan, the figure who had stolen her family and condemned her people. Where Luke saw redemption, Leia saw only a wound that would never heal. Her heart carried both fury and sorrow, and she struggled to accept the blood that tied them together. The New Republic was thrown into fierce debate. Some leaders demanded he be executed, calling it justice for the countless lives lost under his command. Others, though fearful, saw an opportunity. Anakin's knowledge of Imperial fleets, secret bases, and hidden warlords could help secure their fragile victory. To the galaxy, he was not a man, but a question. Was he a curse returned from death, or a chance to turn darkness into light? Anakin himself desired nothing but to walk beside Luke. He refused power, refused armies, and sought no throne. Instead, he offered his wisdom, teaching his son what the Jedi had overlooked and what the Sith had twisted. Together, they spoke of rebuilding the Jedi as guardians of balance, not servants of pride. The galaxy watched in silence. To some, his survival was proof that even the darkest night could break before dawn. To others, it was a shadow that would never fade. Anakin Skywalker lived, and his presence changed everything. When the Emperor was destroyed and the Death Star tore itself apart, Luke Skywalker carried his father away from the fire. In this version of events, Anakin Skywalker did not breathe his last on Endor. His body was weak, his lungs failing, but life still clung to him. The rebels, uncertain if they were saving a monster or a man, placed him in their care. Through long hours of work, healers and machines preserved him, and Anakin opened his eyes once more. The galaxy trembled at the news. Darth Vader, the figure of terror, had survived. For some, it was a reason to demand justice, for others a chance to demand vengeance. Entire worlds scarred by his rule cursed his name, unwilling to see anything but the shadow he had once been. Yet Luke stood beside him, speaking not of Darth Vader, but of Anakin Skywalker, the father who had turned against the Emperor in the final moment. Anakin himself awoke to shame heavier than any wound. He remembered the flames of Mustafar, the cries of the Jedi he had hunted, and the last breath of Padme Amidala. His survival did not feel like mercy. It felt like judgment, a chance to endure the very pain he had caused so many others. But when he looked at Luke, he found the strength to keep walking. Leia Organa's heart was torn in two. She could not see the man her brother saw. To her, he was the hand that had destroyed Alderaan, the shadow that had stolen her parents and her people. Forgiveness was beyond her reach, even as the truth of their blood tied them together. She turned away, unable to embrace him as a father. The New Republic fell into turmoil. Senators clashed, some demanding his execution, others urging restraint, believing his secrets of the Empire could secure peace. Imperial loyalists whispered of his return, hoping to see the Dark Lord lead them once more. But Anakin refused power, refused crowns and armies, seeking instead to guide Luke. Together, father and son dreamed of rebuilding the Jedi Order, not bound by arrogance or blindness, but forged from wisdom and balance. The galaxy watched in silence, unsure if his survival was a curse upon their future or a fragile spark of hope. Anakin Skywalker lived, and nothing would ever be the same again. When the Emperor was cast into the depths of the Death Star and the battle raged outside, Luke Skywalker pulled his father from the shadows of the throne room. In this telling, Anakin Skywalker did not die. His body was frail, his breathing weak, yet life clung stubbornly to him. The rebels, uncertain if they were rescuing a tyrant or honoring Luke's plea, worked to save him. Against all odds, Anakin survived. The galaxy was shaken. To billions, Darth Vader was the face of fear, a name spoken only in whispers. Now he lived, not as a phantom of memory, but as a man once more. For some, this survival was unbearable, a cruel reminder of years under the Empire's iron grip. For others, it was a chance to demand justice. Yet Luke stood firm, calling him father, believing that the man behind the mask had been redeemed. Anakin himself felt no victory in survival. He was haunted by every step that had led him into darkness. The cries of the Jedi Temple, the fire of Mustafar, and the silent loss of Padme Amidala echoed in his thoughts. He carried the weight of Vader's sins like armor heavier than Durasteel. Still, he walked forward, guided by his son's unshaken faith. Leia Organa saw him differently. Her heart was torn between truth and memory. This man was her father, yet he was also the destroyer of Alderaan. Where Luke saw light, Leia saw only pain. Her anger did not fade easily, and though she knew the blood they shared, she could not yet forgive the shadow that had shaped her life. The New Republic was thrown into turmoil. Senators argued endlessly, some demanding his execution, others insisting he could offer knowledge to dismantle the remnants of the Empire. To many, he was not a man, but a question. Could the most feared figure in the galaxy ever be trusted again? Anakin, however, did not seek command or recognition. He wished only to guide Luke, to help him rebuild the Jedi into something wiser and stronger than before. Together, father and son began a new journey, one shaped by redemption and shadow alike. The galaxy watched in silence, uncertain if Anakin Skywalker's survival was a blessing or a curse. When the Emperor was hurled into the abyss and the Death Star shook with fire, Luke Skywalker refused to leave his father behind. In this telling, Anakin Skywalker did not die in his son's arms. His body was battered, his armor broken, but his spirit clung to life. Against the chaos of the battle, Luke carried him to the surface of Endor, where rebel medics fought to preserve the man who had once been Darth Vader. The galaxy reeled when the truth spread. The Dark Lord, whose name had commanded fear for decades, had survived. For many, this was not a moment of mercy, but of horror. Entire star systems, scarred by the Empire's cruelty, whispered in dread, unwilling to believe that the terror of Vader still walked among them. To Luke, however, it was not Vader who lived, but Anakin Skywalker, a father reborn in the final act of saving his son. Anakin himself felt the torment of survival. Every breath reminded him of the countless lives he had destroyed. He saw in his mind the faces of the Jedi he had betrayed, the fires of Mustafar, and the sorrow of Padme Amidala. He bore his survival not as a gift, but as a burden, a chance to endure the pain that he had once unleashed on the galaxy. Yet beside him stood Luke, whose faith gave him the strength to endure. Leia Organa could not look at him with the same hope. To her, he was still the one who had brought ruin to Alderaan, the shadow who had shaped her life with grief. The truth of their bond as father and daughter cut deeply, and she struggled with the conflict between justice and blood. The New Republic was thrown into argument. Some senators demanded swift execution, claiming no redemption could undo his crimes. Others believed his knowledge of Imperial secrets was too valuable to ignore. Even as the galaxy debated, Anakin refused any seat of power, choosing instead to stand with Luke. Together, father and son began the long journey of rebuilding the Jedi. The galaxy watched with wary eyes, uncertain if Anakin Skywalker's survival was a curse upon the stars or a fragile light of hope that even the darkest soul could find its way back.